Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and today I wanted to talk to you about this Neuro Rubini who spoke to a Senate banking committee today. But I don't just want to talk to you about Neuro Rubini, but I want to talk more broadly about naysayers, and in the case of something like that's new, like cryptocurrencies, what it is that must be going through their mind. I watched a portion of this hearing today with this Neuro Rubini. For those of you that don't know, he's an old school economist who they call him Dr. Doom. And for years and years, he's been, his whole thing has been that he predicts the economy is set up to do bad and that type of thing. But he's a long-time economist, and he has a pretty big operation now. But what this reminds me of, and then I'll kind of go into this, I can remember when I was younger, and this was back, I guess it was around 2000. I remember working, and at one time, I remember telling a friend that I had heard that the company that friend worked for, they were going to do layoffs. I had heard that there was going to be layoffs, and I said it not thinking about how that would immediately affect that friend in terms of being worried and scared, and I remember they had an immediate nasty reaction to me, and that's what I was reminded of when I watched this Neuro Rubini. This guy does not just disagree with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. He has a visceral reaction to it. That's what I'm interested in talking about. There's a reason that guys like this guy have a visceral reaction to Bitcoin, and I'm going to make this point at the end of this video to really let it sink in and just kind of come from the standpoint of you and I might feel the same way if we were an old school economist and we saw something like this that really threatened our entire way of life. And I'm going to give you a couple of other examples. But this is Neuro Rubini, and he runs a research. He's got his own brand. This is an article that I found from it's from institutionalinvestor.com. It's a long article, but it's making the point here that he has created an entire research brand, has a huge company at Rubini Global Economics. That's the name of his company. He's an NYU professor. It says Neuro Rubini is now looking, this is from 2011, to grow his multi-million-dollar operation that he's built to compete with Wall Street firms for the ear of investors. So my point in showing you this, and you can Google this article, just look this article up, and it details how entrenched he is in the existing financial system and how he's making multiple millions of dollars in advising the existing financial system. So there's no telling who runs this guy in terms of putting him up there to say all sorts of bad things about a new thing. But I'm looking at it from a bigger picture. What I'm really looking at this from is, this is a guy who has become a great success the way things are. And guys like that, especially when they're older, do not like to hear about the way things are going to be, because it threatens their entire way of life. And I'm going to illustrate this point, like I said at the end of this video. But there's a couple of other guys that, and here's the aside from this. Before cryptocurrencies came along, there was a lot of things this guy said that I agree with. But I don't believe for a minute that the things that he's saying that are anti-cryptocurrencies and anti-Bitcoin, and just anti-digital assets, I don't believe the things that he's saying have anything to do with anything other than his fear of the change that's coming. And I'll give you two more examples of that. One is Jim Rickards. I think I showed you this yesterday. But this guy is a long time gold bug, and he's very similar to the other guy in that he's kind of a gloom and doom guy too, and talks about a lot like I talk about, a lot of the irresponsible things that the government is doing. I actually agree with Jim Rickards a lot on a lot of things, and most things really. But the difference between he and I is that he's a gold guy. I'm also a gold and silver guy, but I believe there's more opportunity in the short to mid to, say the next 1 to 5 years. I believe there's a once in 2 or 3 lifetime opportunity in these digital assets because of the new asset class. And then myself, and I've said it before, much of the money that I make from being a part of a once in 2 or 3 lifetime thing, I'm going to put back into gold and silver a lot of the money. And so, and the reason, and because I know that I think that digital assets are going to be a long time thing, and I'll always have some in them, but gold and silver is not going anywhere either. Well, these guys have built their entire career. This guy here has built his entire career on the people putting their money in the risk assets. I've even seen him on infomercials that more or less send people into gold and silver. And so he's got a huge vested interest. These guys are literally majorly vested in a certain area. And an even better example that I'm going to give you now is a guy that I've listened to a lot. Peter Schiff has gone out of his way to bash Bitcoin any chance he gets. Like this is a tweet he did today. Actual gold is up 2.5% today and is trading like a safe haven. Bitcoin, digital fool's gold, is down 4.5% today and is trading like a risk asset. If you own Bitcoin because you think it's a store of value, you are mistaken. You should sell your Bitcoin and buy gold. Peter Schiff, also being old school and also a guy who I agree with most of what the guy says, he's making a major miscalculation on this, and he's making it out of fear. These are guys that are not dumb guys. These are smart guys. But the problem is that their livelihood, I mean, when you spent in Peter Schiff's case, he spent maybe the last 10 or 20 years doing nothing but promoting gold. Do you think it would be easy for him to do a pivot to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies? It would be too difficult of a move. He's got too much of a following in gold. So here's this Bitcoin all of a sudden, and he sees it going up like crazy. It's a threat to his way of life. He's got a literal gold company, and he even advertises on here that you can buy gold with Bitcoin on here. I think that's been as far as he's willing to go. I think he's making a major miscalculation here. But again, I agree with most of what the guy says. But I want to illustrate for you. Now, I have told you that this is the best example that I've ever seen of what I'm trying to tell you here. And I've told you I've read you part of the quote, and I've told you part of this story before. But I want to read you the full quote from this movie. It's from Moneyball, and I've told you about this particular scene. The other day I told you about this scene in the context of Ripple being the first one through the wall and getting bloodied. That was the first part of it, though. There's another point in this scene that I want to go over, and since there's new people listening, I'm going to go back over the Moneyball thing, because this is exactly what's going on with all of these people that I otherwise agree with a lot of what they say. And I've kind of been scratching my head, but I truly understand why they are coming from the place that they're coming from now. So, Moneyball, for those of you that have not seen it, an excellent movie. Go see it tonight if you haven't seen it. And you can right here. You can rent it on YouTube for $2.99. So watch it if you haven't watched it. It's with Brad Pitt. Excellent movie. But the gist of the movie is back in, I think, around the 2000 or so, Brad Pitt's character who is Billy Beane. I think he still is the A's manager. He was the A's manager in the movie. And Billy Beane does not have near the budget, near the millions of dollars that the big teams like the Yankees and the Boston Red Sox had. And he lost good players to them who were willing to pay him more money. Went to his owner and asked for more money, but the guy said, "We don't have the money." So the whole movie is about him using numbers to try to using statistics to try to find players that got on base more often than other players, but were really undervalued because they weren't considered the premium rock star baseball players. But they actually, if you peeled back the numbers, had a greater on base percentage. And he didn't care in his formulas. He didn't care how they got on base. What was important to him is that they got on base more often than other people. Didn't matter if it was a walk or anything else. Well, anyway, long story short, he goes through the entire season and ends up winning more games. They said in this same scene that he won more games without those major multi-million-dollar players than he did with them. And so he had basically changed the game. Well, there's another scene in the movie where they would go into the room to talk about players with the scouts from the A's that worked for the A's scouts. And so they're in there, and he really upsets all the scouts when he starts talking about picking players based on base percentages instead of different things that the scouts looked at, like their gut instinct or the way how confident a guy looked, or things that the scouts argued that nobody without experience could really do. You couldn't just look at numbers. And so, but at the end of the season, when he had won all these games, he had proven everybody wrong, and he had in essence changed the game. And so the Boston Red Sox owner, which is this guy, invites him for a meeting and gives him a job offer because he's just changed baseball. Well, I want to read for you. I've read for you the first part of the exchange where I was talking about how Ripple just was the first one through the wall and got bloody, in that they were the first digital asset, that XRP was the first digital asset that went live in commercial production. And that was a major point that I made, and it's true. But I'm going to finish what this guy said, because it makes a major point about what it is all of these people that are coming out, and they're almost venomous in their objection to cryptocurrencies, to the point of not making any sense. It's like they're intentionally not listening. And that's what I want to tell you right here. This sums up exactly where they're coming from. They are exactly like those scouts in Moneyball that once they realized that this guy was about to abandon what they had done for the way things had been done for all these years, all of a sudden their jobs were in jeopardy, their livelihoods were in jeopardy. So here's the quote, and this is the owner of the Boston Red Sox talking to Billy Beane. He says, "I know you're taking it in the teeth out there, but the first through the wall always gets bloody, always. This is threatening not just a way of doing business, but in their minds, it's threatening the game. Really what it's threatening is their livelihoods. It's threatening their jobs. It's threatening the way they do things. And every time that happens, and every time that happens, whether it's a government or a way of doing business or whatever it is, the people who are holding the reins and have their hands on the switch, they go batshit crazy. I mean, anybody who's not tearing their team down right now and rebuilding it using your model, they're dinosaurs. And they're going to be sitting on their ass on the sofa in October watching the Boston Red Sox win the World Series." And so that's the quote. And when I read that quote, and I want to read this part again, because when I read this part, it had never dawned on me that word was actually in there, and I see people on Twitter when they're talking about Ripple and the banks use this same term, and I thought sometimes things just come out of nowhere, and you're like, wow, that's profound that same word's being used. So I'm going to read this again, and every time that happens, whether it's a government or a way of doing business or whatever it is, the people who are holding the reins and have their hands on the switch, they go batshit crazy. And that's what you're witnessing right now. And so here's what I say to all of you that are if you're not my fan, or you are my fan, or you're trying to figure out this whole digital asset thing, first thing I'll tell you is what I tell my audience all the time, and that is Ripple, XRP, the digital asset, is the greatest digital asset ever created. It's the fastest, most scalable. It's the best one, period. It's the first one to ever be used in commercial production ever. And here's the final thing, and let it sink in. Any bank, this is me talking, any bank or payment company who is right now not incorporating Ripple XRP into their money flows is going to be out of business in the next 5 years, and at the most 10 years. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe. Hit the like button. Tell your friends and family that the digital asset investor is talking about how their lives can be changed. Thank you for listening.